I said, tonight we're going to be talking about remote ID. We have a very special guest that's joining us, Vic Moss. If you've got any questions, please do tag at Geeksvana in the chat, which will help me identify them. We will come backwards and forwards to those. But without further ado, let's bring our guest in, shall we? Vic, hello, sir. How are you?
Good evening. How are you? I'm fine.
Excellent. Really great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us
Absolutely.
again.
I'm so glad to see Bruce here. What would be a live show with me without Bruce here? Hi, Bruce.
Indeed. Yes, Bruce is one of the commentators which I always look forward to seeing in the chat the most. It has to be said, especially when we're talking about things like remote ID. Welcome in, Bruce. It's good to see you, sir.
Get with him and have a beer. He and I have a
absolutely. I mean, there is a room, there is a dream room where I would like to fill about 10 or 20 people from the worldwide UAS community, and I think it would be absolutely fantastic. Frankly, I think it would be
it would be free for all. That's what happened.
Yeah, we'd probably get about 1 million viewers for a live broadcast of that, but yes, it would be awesome. Yes, but thank you very much for joining us. Could you let the audience know, those who don't know you, who you are, what you do, and why I might want to invite you along to talk about remote ID?
Sure. Well, I usually said I'm Vic Moss. I'm actually a commercial pilot. Let me try that again. I love live stuff. I'm a commercial photographer, videographer. As my profession, I've been doing this professionally for over 30 years. And I'm a drone pilot. So I've been using drones since 2014 and legally since 2016. And one thing led to another. I ended up becoming very deeply involved in the legislative and regulatory side of the drones here in the U.S. And I'm a FAA Safety Team Drone Pro out of the Denver PISDO, which means the running joke is you never want a phone call that says, "Hi, this is Vic from the FAA Safety Team. Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" So I'm just got trouble and I have to educate. But I'm also on the FAA, I hate the new name, Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee. It used to be called the DAC, the Drone Advisory. Now it's technically the AAAC, or for those of you in the audience who remember, there was on a cartoon called Bloom County, there was a cat named Bill the Cat. He would go around going, "Ah!" So I think we ought to have Bill the Cat as our new logo for the AAAC. That's just me. So yeah, I'm heavily involved in that kind of stuff and have become sort of a subject matter expert. In the meantime, with all things FAA and drone related.
Indeed, and therefore someone that we like to wheel out for live shows.
Yeah.
And point at the audience to give information, and then wheel back into your cupboard afterwards.
Yep. I'm okay with that. Hey, you guys haven't done it. We just got finished with a commercial UAV Expo here, and it was awesome in Vegas. I hate Vegas. Vegas sucks. But actually, my car's still there because I blew a transmission on the way there. But it's under warranty, luckily. But it was great seeing everybody and kind of getting back into the whole pre-COVID swing of things. So similar to what you all are having there now, we had here in the States.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, at the same time, so a few of us had to choose which one to go to, which especially as they were both sort of commercially focused trade shows, I thought, you're splitting the community here. I think Vegas is going to win, actually, but anyway, we had quite a few people still come and see us in the UK, which was wonderful. It was still a very busy show, but yeah, there's certainly a lot of people and a lot of money floating around the industry at the moment. So it's going to be a very interesting 5 to 10 years. I don't think we're going to recognize it in 5 to 10 years with the sheer amount of investment that's pouring in from all angles at the moment. It's incredible, really.
Yeah. Yep. Advanced mobility is getting a ton of money.
Indeed. One thing actually that good old Bruce at XJet did raise in the chat, which I'll ask about only because obviously the change from DAC to AAAC in terms of how not how the groups work, but how they're named and that type of thing. With the DAC, yourself and Kenji were on that board as representatives of the hobby industry, or the hobbyist, wasn't it? Yeah.
They're flight drones for the most part, but yeah, we're a citizen what was the silly title? Citizen UAS drone flyers or owners or something like that. Yeah. But we're the only two.
Is that still the same with the AAAC? Is that definition still the same as?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
They just added advanced air mobility to it, since that's kind of a very large part of what's going on in the future. So in a rare show of trying to get ahead of things, the FAA went ahead and added that to the DAC and made it the AM. Yeah, so they're thinking ahead, which I love to see.
Yeah, we've just had the similar thing here in the UK. The CAA have just sort of gone through everyone's job titles, and urban air mobility has popped up. No longer being called future flight, but sort of being called actually we need to start dealing with it now. So actually, yeah, it started here as well, which of course you would expect, being a worldwide phenomena that's about to hit the industry, frankly. So on to remote ID, we've got some key dates that I wanted to discuss first of all, because there is obviously there's not really any change, because of course there's no change in terms of the end user, but there is some subtleties to it, and the first one, which is date 1, which I've actually managed to put you in front of. Let me just change that very quickly. There we go. That really was a spotlight on you, wasn't it? Is, of course, September 16th this year, 2022, which is where drone manufacturers must comply with the final rules requirements for them. Now, this, I almost felt like putting the word delayed in inverted commas, because it's an easy word to use, delayed, because it's something obviously people will understand very quickly, but this has been delayed until December 16th. But of course, the wording is as long as the manufacturer is actually making puts towards. Yeah, so this isn't sort of, I'm a drone manufacturer, so I'm actually just not going to bother now until the 16th of December. I'm going to do no work towards it. This is only really the FAA saying we're going to give you a bit more time to complete the project, essentially.
Yep. And Bruce just made a good point, which is what I was going to make, and he's right. It's deferred enforcement.
Yes.
What drone manufacturers have to do is show work towards. When the Declaration of Compliances were put out by ASTM and others, I think it was just ASTM so far. It did not give the FAA time, or the FAA did not give manufacturers enough time to really get their poop in a group and get out there by actually 2 days from today. So I know Kenji and then Scott Stoffman from AUVSI were pushing really hard to get the FAA to delay it. The problem with the delay is it would literally take an act of Congress, because it's congressional mandated.
Absolutely.
So it's just much easier for the FAA to say, look, we're just going to have deferred enforcement. You see it all the time in all kinds of different government agencies when things like this happen.
Exactly, and it is one of those things where and it's very much whenever we're talking about the rules here in the UK, we always talk about what's the legislation and then what's the policy and what's the guidance, because of course just because there's legislation that says you can't do X, well actually it doesn't mean the regulator has to enforce that exact letter. They can say actually with this mitigation, with this safety mitigation in place, and with if you're doing X, Y, and Z, actually this is the policy for it. So it does change things slightly, which obviously here they are deferring enforcing that. But of course the word delayed is, as I say, it rolls off the tongue so much easier. But it's
how long does it take just to describe what delay actually means, right? So yeah, just use call it happy.
Exactly. Now, this is obviously the part where the drone manufacturers themselves are required to have the standard remote ID. So for us camera drone flyers, the drones that are on my little rack here behind me, they will all get firmware updates, or will all come obviously out of the box for the brand new ones, being able to transmit the required information in the required way to meet the ASTM standards, and therefore be compliant. Now, there is actually a website which I will drop in the chat, which is one of the FAA subsites, which has an existing list of drones and serial numbers. The serial number bit is quite important as well, that have been approved so far. Now, the list is obviously, especially the fact that the enforcement's been deferred, the list is obviously quite short at the moment. There's the usual suspects that you would expect to see on there, and I know people like Skydio have said that their drones are going to be compliant. They've already said that publicly, and Otel's. Here we go. Otel version, Otel 2 version 3. That's it. Will be 2.3. will be fully remote ID compliant as well, which is a bit of a shame for the version 2 people, but they'll obviously have the module option come next year. which it's going to be interesting, because obviously there are subtleties, there are variants from the point of view, especially once you then move across into the FPV side of things and the model RC side of things, etc., as far as what makes a complete kit and that type of thing. And I've heard from Dave Messina on this channel actually talking about perhaps we can leave a few things out of the package and it's not a complete kit, and then I hear other things saying actually that's not the spirit of it. And
yeah, Dave's working on trying to draft, and we're helping him as well at DSPA, draft an advisory circular that says, look, this is not meant this way. So the FAA needs to put out an advisory circular, which, as you say, was not regulation, but it is an advisory circular, and you need to follow it as such. And so they're trying to satisfy the fact that the way it's worded right now, FPV can't be used for 107 unless it's standard instead of module. So they're trying to, one person says one thing, another person says another thing. So they're trying to work that out. So that'll happen. But we've got, don't panic. I like to tell everybody, don't panic. We literally have a year and 2 days before we have to panic. Maybe
yes,
before
indeed.
they're moving fast enough. We'll put the word out. We'll put the big panic sign out. You can put it out there.
Indeed. You'll see the big flashing lights on Geeksvana and everyone's channels, frankly, at that point. Okay, so in terms of the standards themselves, obviously this is something which has been released via the ASTM, which you can pay your $80 and download, and again, as long as you pass the criteria, etc., you can download. It's obviously a fairly closely guarded document in terms of those that have it as well don't like to discuss what's on there and that type of thing, etc.
Well, and it's proprietary. ASTM, their standards that the FAA said that's fine. Someone else may do another set of standards and just put it at open source. Here you go, guys. And really, the only people that need it are the manufacturers. So if you're not a manufacturer and you're just curious, just buy it. But if you're a manufacturer, you'll need to buy that one or a different one or something like that. But it's it's only $80, and ASTM as a private organization, they can do what they want with it. This isn't an FAA decision. I'm sure somebody somewhere will put out an MOC that's public. And
yes, yeah, no, indeed.
So what? It's going to be. You're having trouble sleeping by the ASTM MOC, and you'll nod off right away as you read it. I promise.
Yeah, indeed. I've tried to wrap my head around it a couple of times, which I have in general, but then it starts to get very specific about the manufacturer side of things. I'm like, okay, I don't even need to know this. Actually, this is now getting to the areas where I really truly don't need to know this.
So I want to address what Bruce just wrote. So it's like being charged access to details of the road rules. No, it's not. The road rules are perfectly acceptable. That what you would charge access is, let's say, Tesla has the little things that keep keep you in the line between the lines. They have proprietary ways of doing that. I've got a Dodge minivan sitting out in my garage while my car gets fixed in Vegas. It's got the same thing. Each one of those manufacturers have a different way to do it, but the law says you have to stay between the lines. So that's the public law. The fact that Chrysler does it one way and Tesla does it another way, and ASTM does it their way in this particular instance, not public at all. 100% private, and you can charge what you want for that. Tesla may.
And that is a very important point to make, because this isn't the FAA saying we don't want the end user looking at these standards. This isn't the FAA trying to stop information being out there. This is the ASTM, as you say, protecting their own proprietary data, which of course any company would do. And as you say, it's more than in the next 12 months we're going to see some weird and wonderful developments on this, and we're going to see all sorts of data released by all sorts of different people, and people having a stab at it from an open source point of view, etc., which of course people at RG Pilot are making great progress on, etc., at the moment, and we're going to see some pretty amazing things out there, frankly. So that really is the date that's coming up is this September 16th. Really is something to worry about for the manufacturers. If you're flying your drones out there, be it FPV, be it camera drones, Model RC, just carry on as you are now, and there really isn't anything else which you need to be concerned about. Keep an eye on things, of course, because it's always interesting to see what's happening. And come December 16th, I would expect many of us with the the very popular brand, other brands exist that fill my shelves behind me here, will have their little remote firmware updates, and will then become remote ID compliant, which is fantastic, of course, because it's something that's not going to cost the end user any further money, which I think is a good thing as well. Obviously, if it's done that way, you're not going to have to buy a new drone, or of course actually have a module attached, which I think could get messy with these particular drones. So
some of them absolutely. You know, I was talking with one of the FPV guys there. I was also at another conference Sunday and Monday up in the mountains here in Colorado, and one of the FPV guys was saying, you know, if some of those modules, the way they work out, interfere with both the live feed and the control. And so they've had some blackout issues on some of the races where they're doing testing, and it just kind of drops out. So there has to be that aspect of it as well. Like, you can't put a broadcast module on a FPV drone, especially a racing drone, where grams count.
Yeah.
So that could be a problem. But you know, the FAA is looking at ways around it. Like, for instance, having a mobile FRIA, which I think would be a pain in the butt considering the FRIA process. But the other option, which is probably better, is just kind of have an RID on a stick, and you stick it in the ground, and you're broadcasting RID, and say, look, there's a race going on here. So, you know, it's the reason for remote ID is to find a drone and a drone pilot. That's it. And if you're at a race, yeah, it's hard to tell which drone is which drone pilot, but you can see all the drones, you can see all the drone pilots.
Absolutely.
And it's no big deal.
No, I agree with that. And there is always the argument, of course, here that, you know, this is something that's coming in on September 16th, and then you have the deferred enforcement to December, and then obviously next September we should have all of our ducks in a row, and all of this should be sorted by now. And I've heard that many times over the last few months. And my only issue with that is, yes, I would love things to work that way, but aviation doesn't work that way. Drones industry doesn't work that way. And actually, even if you had everything in place and you said, okay, here are all the forms, here's everything for everything you could possibly do with a drone, one, it actually becomes very restrictive, because you've now got to fly your drone within one of those set situations, one of those set forms, etc. But also, of course, real world use is something which, and real world feedback is something which is going to be very important. And like you just said, speaking to those drone racing guys and actually coming up with that idea of remote ID on a stick, what a fantastic way of getting around that particular problem for these guys, which, as you say, there would be no point having, you know, 30 remote ID pings all over that field. That's not data that anybody can use.
I want to make sure people understand it. That is it's educated speculation, but it is still speculation on my part.
Absolutely, but that's how it has to happen. We have to have these conversations, the same as the conversations that Dave and Kenji are having with the FAA, etc., and trying to get these memos written, etc., to give the guidance and to give the clarity. Because I've yet to find anybody from the FAA that will either off record or on record say they want FPV to stop, or the Model RC world to stop, or anything. You know, they want these industries to continue. They want STEM is an important thing. And you know, unless I'm very wrong, I don't believe that they have an intrinsic wish to see the hobby harmed. Frankly, I haven't seen any of their actions to date. Anyway,
there are FAA people out there that do not like drones. They're a very small minority, but they just don't like drones. They don't understand them. I think it's like fearing the unknown. But for the most part, they're the odd people out. Everybody I work with at the FAA, they don't work for the FAA. That sounds weird. Everybody I talk with at the FAA absolutely loves drones. Whether it's FSDO, whether it's ATC. Here we've got one of our ATC people coming to one of our drone meetups because he wants to see the drones in action. He's going to talk about what happens when you call the tower, blah blah blah. FSDO here love drones. It's the very small minority, and they're on their way out and or changing their tune, because the FAA as a whole understands there are more. This little side note: there are more registered drone pilots in the country than any other category. There are 290,046 for 64 drone pilots, 107 drone pilots registered in the country, and the only one close to that is student pilots. I think they're at 175,000 or 180,000.
No,
so
indeed.
We everybody else.
So we then have the second date coming up, which is next year, and this one will become obviously a little bit more important, slightly more key for all drone pilots, and that's September 16th, 2023. All drone pilots must meet the operating requirements of Part 89. For most operators, this will mean flying a standard remote ID, so that is your DJI drone with its firmware update, or if you've bought it off the shelf, it should already have it. Equipping with a broadcast module or flying at a FRIA. Now, the one I'll talk about first very quickly is FRIA, because we do have a question in the chat about this particular phenomena, and so this is one of the ways which you'll be able to comply, which is flying a drone. And of course, when we say drone, we mean Model RC, FPV, camera drones, everything that's under that generic term, in a recognized FAA recognized identification area, or FRIA for short, and you can operate there without broadcasting. And they obviously must be flown within visual line of sight within the FRIA, and anyone can fly there, but FRIAs can only be requested by community-based organizations and educational institutions. Now, Dennis, hi Dennis, good to see you in the chat. His question is regarding ID and AMA chartered clubs that fly fixed wings, and how can those clubs become a FRIA? Has that side of things become clearer yet in terms of how to set up a FRIA?
No. This is a question probably asked weekly to the person working on the FRIA stuff. And my last question to them was, I said, when? He said, unofficially, we don't know yet. No, officially, we don't know yet. Unofficially, very soon. What that means, I don't know. But it is coming down the pipe. We understand that it has to happen soon. There are hangups in usually the FAA legal office where this stuff sits and ruminates. And it needs to kind of get off that particular desk and out into the world. But it is something that the integration office understands has got to be done, and they're pushing for it hard. I saw somebody else, I'm having trouble reading your chat because it's real small on my screen, but it says somebody else that AMA went ahead and put out the rules for that. Unless something happened in the last hour, they have not put out the rules according to the FAA. Or, AMA does work closely with the FAA, and maybe they're jumping the gun just a little bit.
Yeah, or perhaps they're giving their guidance of what they think might happen, or
exactly.
something of that, something of that nature. But the FRIAs essentially are going in as far as I understand them, the intention of them is that they are a community-based flying zone. So it could be set up by people like the AMA, by a local school, that type of thing, where it is a set zone where you'll be able to fly your drones, obviously for reasons of STEM, hobby, whatever's going on in there. And within that zone, you won't have to be broadcasting your remote ID information. So it essentially becomes a remote ID free zone. That can obviously be handy if FRIAs are not. I don't expect them to be very easy to gain the status of a FRIA, of course, because it needs to have some weight to it. But if it isn't too complicated, that's obviously something that people could set up. As you were saying before, that perhaps even sort of mobile FRIAs in terms of race days and world championship meetups and that type of thing. But that's really the essence of FRIA, isn't it? That it's zones, regular zones where people can go and fly.
Right. Now, one thing we keep forgetting to mention, and maybe you did and I didn't hear it, and you did mention it, that remote ID is tied to registration. Now, if you're sub 250 recreational, you can fly anywhere you want without remote ID. So I can pull one of my little tiny hawks, or if I'm flying although I won't fly my minis with that remote ID because that's just me. I can go out to the park and fly my mini all day long without remote ID. If you can fly at the park, you got to obviously watch your city regulations as well.
Indeed, yes.
But so if you're under 250 grams in recreational, you do not have to have remote ID because you don't have to register, and you can fly anywhere. Now, anywhere you're allowed. Let me rephrase that. We do need to make sure that law enforcement understands that, because I know they're going to have the FAA is going to push hard on education of that aspect once remote ID is a thing. For educational purposes, nobody wants to bust anybody for flying without remote ID. But they need to make sure they understand that the 250 grams are exempt recreationally.
Yes, indeed. And there is obviously going to be, whenever you have regulations crossing over from federal to local law enforcement and that type of thing in terms of being able to enforce them, there's always going to be a bit of lag. We have that here in this country. In fact, we have entire YouTube channels that will go out and test local police to see if they know the sub 250 gram rules, etc. So it's a bit of a phenomena here at the moment, but never mind. So you're always going to have that lag.
Something local does not enforce federal regs. What they would do in a situation where they come across them is they would take information and send it to FSDO, which is, for those of you who don't know, FSDO is Flight Standard District Office. It's sort of the local FAA office, and that's where that's what local law enforcement will do. Now they can enforce your reckless flight, but just because of reckless endangerment and stuff like that. But they're not going to enforce federal rules, so people don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, and I often say here in the UK as well that actually you don't often hear a lot of people being prosecuted for X, Y, Z under the drone rules, because actually it ends up coming up under something on non-aviation legislation. Actually, you're breaking the law in another way, basically. So yes, it isn't just the drone rules that you have to consider, as you were saying, regarding when you're flying in cities and that type of thing as well in the States. The next one is obviously standard remote ID, and this is probably for the vast majority of my audience, especially who are probably something like 60-40 on maybe even 70-30. I'm trying to make myself sound cooler that I have a larger FPV audience than I actually have, but there we go. Where that is the standard remote ID, and this is your manufacturer purchased complete drone that will have the system built in, and from takeoff to shutdown, the drone will broadcast the drone ID, the drone location and altitude, drone velocity, control station location and elevation, the time mark and emergency status. So this is as I say, one particular. Obviously, we've also been talking about there's the other side of things where we actually have the modules, and this is going to basically be a way of allowing you to update your existing aircraft, be they camera drones, FPV or Model RC, and it will do everything the same as the standard remote ID. But for this one, it's going to only capture your takeoff position of the controller of the control station, because of course, because it isn't built into the system, it won't be able to track it constantly, but it will still give a single blip, as it were, to show where that point is. So those are probably the two main ways that people are going to be finding themselves coming across remote ID. Initially, of course, next year we're going to have a lot of people with a lot of drones that need one of those modules. Have you seen much in your conversations out there with industry and regulator and everybody? Have you seen much of these modules yet? I know obviously a lot of people are holding them very close to their chest at the moment, because everyone wants to see what everybody else's ideas are first before they
test their systems, or bringing in their ones from Europe. There's a couple from the EU that people are doing, and I'm sure there's prototypes out there that have the modules, and they're testing and that kind of thing. I know there's some apps that are being tested, but it's all beta or alpha, and nobody's really put anything out yet on exactly what those modules are look like. One key difference too I want to talk about between modular and standard is standard. The remote ID fail-safe check is going to be tied into the controller. So if you fail if you fail the pre-check, it will not take off. And when it comes to the module, if you fail the pre-check, it'll say, let's say there's a red light or something on the module. Then it's up to you as an RPIC to go ahead and say, yeah, I can't fly.
Okay, excellent. So there, with the module, there's going to be a little bit more onus on you to ensure everything's okay and to check things up.
On the standard too, but that's just Vic talking. That's not anybody officially. I think it should be the RPIC for all kinds of reasons. You should have heard some of the BB loss conversations we had this weekend.
No, indeed, absolutely, and that's also and in fact that's also one of the variations, of course, with all of the in the next 12 months, in the next couple of years, both sides of the ponds, BV loss is going to be something we're going to be talking about an awful lot, and of course the module is something which is specifically excluded from BV loss. So it does actually say if you've got a module rather than the built-in standard remote ID, that BV loss is excluded, and I think that's just because of the standard of the aircraft, isn't it? Essentially, that's coming, but BV loss is a whole other conversation for the future.
Yeah, we can start there, but no, if you want to keep this under 4 minutes, right?
Yeah, indeed, exactly. Under 4 hours, yes, exactly. Now, one other fairly hefty subject within this, and of course it's something which has been reported on this channel. It's something which a lot of people have discussed quite openly, and are, you know, reasonably concerned. I think they have a reasonable right to be concerned about this. Is that information and the information being broadcast to the public?
Mhm.
Now, we have, of course, the vision of, you know, somebody opening a drone radar 24 type of clone, and being able to watch, you know, flights over in California from New York, etc. Which, of course, it isn't going to be anything like that, because this is
It's
a
a network at
very
all.
local system, very local system. We have seen a couple of companies talk about the fact that they are going to provide the service, so they are going to be showing this on a local basis, but really you're looking at people that, for instance, if I were to see if I was in the United States and I were to see a drone flying, that's perhaps when the person's going to be opening up the app and having a look to see
Right.
what's going on there. So it isn't, it is a very localized thing. That, of course, still
That's right.
that does, personally, I do think that can, of course, you know, cause issues. But what's your thoughts on that side of things?
You really want this under 40 minutes? Um, it's pilot location is a major issue. It's actually something a number of us are working on. Kenji actually has already announced this, so I can't announce it. If anybody's using his patent for his remote ID system, they have to promise that pilot location will not be available for the standard version. It's going to be a law enforcement only type version or first responder type version, that kind of thing. I think he announced that on Hayas and Greg's show. So that's going to be one way to do it. It's going to be an issue in that under 18 USC 32, which is the U.S. code that protects aircraft, drone pilots and drone crews are not protected because the language in that ordinance, in that law, is flight crews on aircrafts. And last time I checked, I was not on my drone. And so what we're trying to do in this legislative session, maybe even the 2023 FAA Reauthorization Act, is we're working with Jonathan Ruprecht, and he's putting together a draft, something that the working title is Drone Pilot Safety Act. So we're going to try and get that pushed through, either add it to USC 32, add it to 4.09, 107, whatever. Yeah, because we do need that protection, because I've said this before, I'll say it again, someone is going to die. And that's not really this. I don't think I'm exaggerating here. And it may not be a drone pilot, because I know plenty of
Mm,
drone pilots that carry either open or concealed.
mm,
Um, Here in Colorado, it's an open carry state. I don't, but I do carry capsicum bear gel with me. I can shoot somebody in the face with bear gel 40 feet away, 30 feet away.
yeah,
The wind's not blowing.
no,
And
indeed.
so if I feel the need. So it's an issue. The FAA understands an issue, but it needs to be addressed, and we're hoping to get it addressed in the 2023 FAA Reauthorization Act. Because if we can get it introduced, and we can find somebody in each house to introduce it, which one of the Congress critters in their right mind would vote no on that? So all we
Yeah.
got to do is get it in there, get a couple sponsors, and we'll be protected. Because right now we're not, other than assault and blah blah blah. But there's no federal protection for us right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's something which I do struggle with, because I don't think it's any secret that I'm not necessarily, you know, I'm not someone here in the UK. I have a very popular series of videos discussing the drone rules, and we do the same for some of the FAA stuff as well. And I've had, you know, we've had national police on this channel, we've had our regulator on the channel, etc. So I do support the system, as it were, and I do want people to fly safely,
Mhm.
and you know, I do support fair and good regulation, but I'm not entirely sure, from what I see from the point of view of public releases and the conversations the FAA are having publicly on their own channel and live streams and that type of thing, that they necessarily do understand the significance of the pilot location issue. And it's some, I'm trying to put it very, very kindly and politely, if that makes sense.
Go ahead.
Because, you know, in a live stream with Kevin, where he stated that actually he feels that it's a law enforcement issue. It's something they will review if it becomes an issue. But in the same sentence, he also says we are aware that there has been confrontation already with drone pilots. And to me, that's sort of, okay, so you're aware of the issue, you're aware of the fact that you're now going to be giving information more publicly. Yeah, so to me, it doesn't necessarily. I don't feel that they do get it completely, or if they do, I'm even more worried.
They do. I promise you that. The problem with any government official, FAA, FBI, CIA, IRS, any of them who are public faces like Kevin is, um, they have to stay within a certain script because anything they say can then become policy since it's out there publicly. So they have to be very careful saying things. I've spoken with a number of FAA people that totally understand, look, this is not good. We need to make sure this doesn't happen, and we need to figure out how to fix it. Um, the FAA is an education and safety agency, not an enforcement agency. So we're actually going to push real hard to get the DOJ involved. In a few instances I've been part of where people have been shot at or shot down, then it goes up, it goes local, and it goes to what's called the LEAP, Law Enforcement Assistance Program, goes to FSDO. FSDO pushes it up, and then it hits the floor of the DOJ, and the DOJ said, nobody died, we don't care. It's not our problem. Figure it out. So we need to get the DOJ involved, and we need to get them to understand that, hey, we're not asking you to go out and, prosecute at the federal level somebody who would then beat up a drone pilot. I mean, it'd be nice, but it's not going to happen. We have to be realistic. What we want are, we have a number of drones that have been shot down. I'm actually compiling the list for Kenji tomorrow. And we want, I used to say we want a couple of public hangings of people who did that, but I backed off because that's kind of extreme. But I would love to see a few public floggings. But maybe we should bring public floggings back. I think that's just a good idea overall. But, just a couple of DOJ public floggings of somebody who attacks us, somebody who shoots one down. There is a story.
I think more public, something more public, and a couple of examples made, as it were. I think that would be very, very positive, because that news would spread very quickly. And not necessarily floggings, but certainly, certainly reasonable justice.
The hanging, yeah, that's a bit extreme.
So yeah, it is one of those issues, because of course it's kind of, I see it ahead in the headlights as something really similar to the spotter rule on the FPV side of things, that we all know that the vast majority of FPV pilots do not have spotters. And they do not fly with spotters. I know it's a crazy thing to suggest. How dare I?
This afternoon.
But this to me feels like it's almost becoming the spotter thing of remote ID, that actually people will try to avoid remote ID as much as they humanly can, because they simply just do not want people to know their location. And my issue with that, of course, is that you are effectively, I don't want to be dramatic in saying you're criminalizing drone pilots for not wanting to follow something which isn't good regulation. It's sort of, to me, it starts to get quite muddy.
No, I understand that enforcement's going to be an issue, and I think the FAA understands that it's safety's got to be an issue. Without safety, you're not going to get compliance. Without compliance, you're not going to get the future of the drone stuff, really, because you need to start somewhere. And remote ID with UTMs, unmanned traffic management, is got to start somewhere, and it's got to be a fairly decent compliance right off the bat, or else it's not going to happen. And the FAA understands that. We'll see. I mean, we don't know if it's going to work or not.
No, indeed.
I have to.
It's
I have to comply. Absolutely. But
yeah,
I know plenty who probably won't.
No, indeed. And it is going to be very interesting, because a lot of eyes are going to be on the States over the next few years. Here in the UK, we've and in parts of Europe, they're wanting to kick the remote ID can down the road a few years, probably to see what happens over there as well from that point of view. But we've also got systems here, things like Project Skyway, which is a trial where actually everything in the zone is going to be tracked rather than individual drones being identified. And it's actually the BV lost drones that are going to be ATC'd out of the way of hobby drones and that type of thing, etc. I fear how that works on scale, but anyway, it's good to see different types of trials happening around the world.
With Drone Up and the Walmart delivery stuff, they're doing similar things.
Yeah, exactly. So it's good to see, and this is obviously, which is part of I think the growing pains that we're going through as well, from the point of view that this was the Wild West. We were, people didn't really care about the sub 400 foot airspace. They didn't really see these toys that we're flying around to be anything specific that they could monetize, apart from selling us those toys, of course. That was the main monetization of the sub 400. But now we have so many people coming, and of course, I support the jobs that are coming. I support the industry that's going to be built around that, and there's going to be a lot of good jobs as well. They're not, I look at good and bad jobs, and I think this kind of employment is going to be good jobs for people to do. They're going to be healthy jobs. They're going to be educated jobs, etc. So I support that industry 100%. But it is just obviously very difficult to bring a community along with that up until that point has had free reign of that airspace, essentially. So almost you get that point where people start to feel like they own that airspace, when of course nobody does. As we as drone pilots will say to other people, no one owns the airspace. Well, neither do we, of course, it's a difficult one to get across.
Don't confuse ownership with control.
Yes.
I almost always have conversations with that when people say I own it. It's like, yeah, but you don't control it.
Okay, so it sounds like behind the scenes with people like Kenji, yourself, Dave Messina, etc. There's lots of busy work happening with across lots of desks within the FAA UAS drone side of things to try and get clarifications, to try and get movements, etc. Which is a very positive thing. One thing which I realize I'm talking to you on behalf of Kenji here, but only answer what you can. You were mentioning about sort of Kenji's side of things with his patent, that he's thinking of enforcing that actually you won't be able to use it unless only law enforcement can see, or law enforcement authority type can see the pilot location. Would that basically stop someone using that patent then? Because of course, if you have to have, if the rule says it has to be public and this patent stops that happening, would it stop it?
It wouldn't stop it. You mean stop the rule? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's essentially stop any product being made under that patent, because of course, if that product would then not be compliant.
No, it would be. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I tell everybody that you're getting legal advice from somebody with an art degree. But if you're not you're still broadcasting the entire message that's required. That's the requirement, is to broadcast the entire message. The requirement, if I remember correctly, is not worded in such that it has to be, the entire message doesn't have to be received. So if you cut off the personal data, which really is only going to be location, you're still broadcasting the entire thing, but you're not letting everybody see it. You're going to have a prescription method or whatever. Put in a key. I mean, I don't know, because there's ways that law enforcement already can get things that we can't as civilians, and so that mechanism is already in place. It just has to be then applied to a remote ID app. Now, that doesn't stop somebody from having an open source app out there that anybody can use. Kenji is trying to figure out what I can say here.
Of course,
there is right now with somebody putting out open source that we're trying to fight. Let's just say it, and that's why I'm compiling the list of victims for him tomorrow.
Excellent. Okay,
so it was to convince somebody who wants to put out an open source app type thing that anybody can use. That's our goal, is to not let that happen.
And I suppose that open source being open source, that's a big fight. That's a big ask, isn't it? Really, because once you get rid of that person, then the next person pops up that wants to do it, and the next person, and yes, indeed, it does become something difficult. But again, as you say, if you are able to also work on the other side of things from the point of view of a Pilot Safety Act type of situation, and then of course you introduce it into law, then it becomes, obviously you are then protected, so things would have to change.
Paper. We still want to get those extra oomph from the federal alphabet agencies that are supposed to protect us. That, by the way, we pay to protect us with our taxes. So yeah, they need to poop or get off the pot. I think I'll say it that way. Keep it PG.
Yeah, indeed, exactly.
When it comes to enforcing one of the issues that we have, I know people have been shot down. Very expensive birds shot down. So we'll see.
Indeed, excellent. Well, we will bring things to a close there, because as I say, this is the type of subject that I can talk about for 4 hours, and I can talk about with you, Vic, for another 4 hours, just from the fact of the information that you have. I'd love to plug your brain in somehow and download it all for everyone to search, but there we go. You and Kenji.
I'm going to let that happen.
But yes, but thank you very much for joining this evening. I really do appreciate you taking the time out. You can see Vic's website address above him there, dspalliance.org. You can also see the Pilot Institute logo just above there. So if you're thinking of taking your Part 107, Greg is absolutely fantastic, and why you would even think about taking it anywhere else, I don't know. He's also just released, hasn't he got a very good looking presenter doing a particular videography and photography course on his site as well?
Old guy with a gray beard that does part of a photography course with Ken Dono and Billy Kyle too. That's kind of fun.
Oh, okay.
That's too crazy.
So despite the fact that it's got Ken Dono and Billy Kyle, I still recommend that you go and watch Vic's excellent course on the, because of course, how long have you been doing it professionally yourself?
1988.
So that's a lot of experience.
Since 2004.
Yeah, and I rarely hear Greg get as excited about one of his new courses, actually, and he's really animated, and he's very excited about the amount of value that one is adding. So yes, but indeed, but as I say, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have you on again soon whenever there's something chunky to update people on. But hopefully from tonight's shortish video, you'll be able to get the data that you need, the information that you need to be able to push on for the next 12 months. But essentially for now, just keep flying as you are, safely, legally, registered if you need to be, etc.
I do have a little nugget for your listeners, though.
Excellent.
And I mentioned earlier, I used your show as the catalyst to get the FAA to answer a question for me. And you mentioned it earlier that the doc page has been posted. There's 10 drones on there, including 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 DJI drones. And what you're going to be able to do, I did it today with one of my drones. Don't do it right now because the drone zone still needs to be worked on. So if you have drones registered in the drone zone, which you should, you can go in there, and some of them, if you click on view, those 3 little dots in your inventory, there's a bunch of options that pop up, and if one of them says edit, you can then edit that particular drone, and it automatically populates the remote ID serial number.
Awesome.
So that works for you, and then you just print out a new drone registration. I have 3 of the drones that are on the list, and only the Avata worked. So the Mavic 3s don't work yet, so don't do those. But again, don't worry about it. The only thing you really need to worry about is if you've got a Category 1 compliant drone and you want to fly operations over sustained operations over open air assemblies is the actual wording. In which case, the only one is going to be the Mini 3, and even that, I'm not a fan of flying that over people. I want prop guards.
Yeah,
so Mini 2 is Category 1 compliant with Japanese batteries.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that information. I really do appreciate it. But as I say, there's the dspalliance.org. There's Pilot Institute, and if you'd like to hire Vic, which you can do as a commercial operator as well. It's an important one. I fly commercially myself, and I'm always like, remember that people earn money from this as well. Then it's mossphotography.com.
.biz.
mossphotography.biz.
In DC, also a good photographer, but he's a portrait guy. So mossphotography.biz.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time on Geeksvana.
Absolutely. Anybody has any questions, you know how to find me. I'm so easy, it's stupid.
Thanks everybody for joining us. See you again soon.
Happy.
Indeed.
Bye-bye.